Orphanages of Horror. Hello friends of the dark secret community, I hope you are doing well. As you know, the December holidays are approaching, and many eagerly await these days to gather with their families. However, there are little ones for whom every day is the same, and they are completely alone. Children who, due to some unfortunate circumstances, have ended up in orphanages, places about which many completely terrifying stories are told. Horror stories that these little ones should never have had to endure. I'm not saying that all orphanages are the same, but the one I'm going to tell you about tonight can undoubtedly haunt your most disturbing dreams. Children who scream desperately for help. You are listening. Dark Secret. Hello, Dark Secret community. My name is Norma, and I want to share with you what happened in a hospice that was located next to the elementary school my brothers attended. This terrifying event was experienced by some classmates of my brother. Next to the elementary school, there was a hospice or orphanage that had been there for a long time. I still remember it, and you could see the children in their uniforms like soldiers, always sad, from the classrooms on the first floor. We would peek when we could to see some of the activities they were doing. We could hear them being shouted at to do things, and it was said that they were woken up at 5 in the morning or earlier to be bathed with cold water. They were given mediocre meals, and many unpleasant things were evident. We couldn't watch them for long because we would be reprimanded, and they even more so. It saddened me a lot to see the children there. Fortunately, I was only there for one more year, and then I moved to another elementary school because it was distressing to see all that. I don't know if the orphanage is still there, but my brothers experienced more things, and one of the disturbing things they remember is what their classmates told them on one occasion. During that time, the elementary school was going to celebrate a Christmas party, and they were already making preparations, thinking about food, decorations, and everything they would receive. It was less extravagant at that time, and they received fewer things, but it was still very nice for everyone. As I mentioned, it was a large school with several classrooms, which contrasted a lot with what was happening on the other side of the wall. They couldn't do more because it was known that if they gave them anything, the caretakers of the orphanage would get upset. For a long time, I heard that very unpleasant things were said. There were events that were not entirely explained, but you could infer them, like there were children who didn't leave or escaped, as they said in that place, but, in reality, terrifying things happened to them. It was always said that at night, when the elementary school was closed, things happened during the night, vile acts that cannot be discussed here, and the internalized children were forced to keep quiet. It was only known by those who, by some miracle, managed to escape from such a place full of neglect. Amidst all this, December arrived with its Christmas parties, and what happened was as follows. That day, they left the classroom to celebrate in the courtyard with music and some games that the teachers organized. Later, they would break the piñatas and then go back to their classrooms for breakfast and for the teachers to give them the customary Christmas bonus of candies. When Jose, a friend of my brother, was in the courtyard counting his candies with other classmates, he looked to the side where there was a planter. He later said that he felt like someone was watching them. He saw a child sitting on one of the planters in the back, swinging his legs while looking at them with sadness, sometimes lowering his gaze. The little one didn't say anything to the classmates or my brother. They continued with the candies, but it seemed like none of them noticed the child. He was observing everything they were doing, and then Jose remembered that perhaps the child stayed in that corner for fear of being seen and taken back into the orphanage. He had the uniform they wore in that place, which made him think that he came from there, but he also wondered how he managed to sneak out without being noticed. His friends snapped him out of his thoughts, asking him why he was looking over there. Jose looked again at the place where the planters were, but the child was no longer there. He thought that the child had to hide because otherwise, he would be accused. After all, they didn't celebrate anything in the orphanage, and he probably found it interesting. He kept silent while searching for something to say, and then they were asked to go back to their classrooms. When everyone was in the classroom, they took out their plates and cups to start breakfast. But Jose was still bothered by the orphanage child who had hidden behind the planters. He finished his breakfast and asked the teacher for permission to go to the bathroom. However, his real intention was to go in search of the child to give him something. Luckily, he was sitting right where he had seen him before. Jose approached him, asked for his name, and whether he came from the other school, as they called it. The boy replied affirmatively, saying that he had lived there for a long time but had escaped. He liked to look toward their school because it was very different from where they lived. Jose gave him some candies and told him to be careful not to be seen so as not to be accused by those in the orphanage. The boy said not to worry, that he would leave soon. Jose said goodbye to him because he couldn't take too long and told him they would talk later. Then he ran back to his classroom. Later, he went out again to see if he could spot him, and there he was, sitting. He wasn't sure whether to tell his friends or not. He wanted to keep quiet because he didn't want anyone else to notice the boy's presence. After all, he just wanted to see how they enjoyed themselves in the elementary school. That's how the day ended, and they lined up to leave, but he noticed that his new friend was still in the background. However, this time, he was standing next to the planter as they were about to go to the door. Jose looked at him, and the boy waved his hand in a goodbye gesture, which Jose reciprocated. They would see each other later, or maybe not, as there would be no more celebrations for the time being. However, Jose intended to stop by and say hello. Days later, Jose went to the bathroom. He had forgotten about the boy for a while, as he was busy thinking about other things. When he entered the bathroom, he found the boy from the planters. He greeted him and asked if anyone had seen him enter the bathroom. The boy said no, that he had just come in because he saw Jose coming, and he just wanted to say hello because he would be leaving in a few days. Jose asked if he was going to another school, but the boy said something like that. He and some other children were going to a better place, and he wanted to thank Jose for talking to him and for the candies he had given him. He mentioned that he would only be there for a few more days. Just then, a classmate came out of one of the stalls and asked whom Jose was talking to. When Jose looked to say that he was talking to his friend Tono, as the boy had said his name was, he stopped midway. When he looked back, Tono was no longer there. The classmate laughed and said, "You see ghosts," then washed his hands and left. Jose was pensive but ignored it because he knew Tono had to hide to avoid being exposed. He quickly entered the bathroom to avoid drawing attention and left as fast as he could. As he did, he turned to his right, and there was the boy again, right next to the planter. He thought, he arrived early, and no one saw him. Good. The next day, when they arrived at school, there was a commotion at the orphanage. There were even patrol cars outside, and they were being sent back, being told that the school would be closed for the day because they were conducting investigations at the orphanage, and they didn't want to disturb the noise from the elementary school. Parents looked worried as they couldn't imagine what would later be discovered in that dreadful place. So, all the children went back home while the investigation took place. What was learned in the following days is that a child from the orphanage had escaped and alerted the authorities about strange things happening there. Not only was there abuse and more, but they were also concerned that at night, when they were sent to sleep, some of their classmates were taken away. They were told they had to do some work and would return later to sleep. However, in the morning, they realized they didn't come back, and they were told it was because they stayed where they were taken to work. If they misbehaved or tried to escape, they would be taken too. It was better not to ask questions, they were told, as it was better for them since they would have more food and beds, which, from what was known, they lacked. When they investigated what was happening there, they discovered several strange things. Initially, they were reluctant to let them in, as it was an orphanage, and supposedly, all the children were well treated. However, when the officials informed them that they had been reported by the women who worked there, responsible for feeding and teaching the children, they couldn't defend themselves. The women stated that those men who claimed to be the teachers were exploiting them. In the end, there were 1,000 things wrong with that place. The worst part came when they tried to escape. They were apprehended, and a thorough search of the entire place was conducted, revealing something that left us speechless. As they toured the orphanage, they opened a room that had a false wall. After knocking it down, they found something even more sinister inside that wall. 3 bodies were suspended on poles, showing signs that they had been there for a while. The bodies of the children were removed from that horrific scene. It was a terrible sight, and because they had used a lot of lime, there was still no odor. The questions of how long they had been there, who they were, and why this happened to them remained unanswered. Later, it was revealed that these 3 children had tried to escape their oppressors because they were living with a lot of abuse. When one of the hospice children realized this, he informed the women in the place. That's when, one by one, they were taken away. For those who didn't know, they were told that they had been taken to work. But that wasn't all. When they investigated who the missing children were at the orphanage, the men confessed their identities, which were later confirmed by the other kids. They provided 3 names, and among them was Tono. This is how Jose later found out that the boy who told him he had escaped and would soon go to a better place with his friends was the same one who, unfortunately, ended up on that false wall with 2 other boys, tragically seeking their freedom. Now, Jose fondly remembers Tono and knows that he was very happy while watching them. He thanked him for sharing some candies from the Christmas party. His heart told him that Tono was now in a much better place, as he had mentioned. Jose never mentioned that amid all the horror, he had found a friend in search of peace and freedom, who tragically reached the afterlife. They closed that orphanage, and it reopened later with different people, but it lasted for about 2 years and then closed forever. Story based on true events. Original and written for Oscuro Secreto by Gemisha, the Goddess of Darkness. Dear friends, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you receive notifications when we upload a new horror story. It's completely free. If you liked the video, leave your comment, thumbs up, and share it with your friends. See you in the next broadcast of Oscuro Secreto.